Shabbat Shalom. And Hannah, first, Mazel Tov to you and all those who cherish you. When Rabbi Sapedin passed the Torah down through the generations of your family and then placed it into your waiting arms, as you know, she was metaphorically reenacting what our ancestors experienced at Sinai. There, the Torah teaches that our ancestors stood around the base of Mount Sinai when Moses came down with the law in his arms, and the entire community, some 600,000 of them, said in one voice, Na'aseh v'nishma, which means, first, we accept the Torah, and later we'll come to understand what the responsibilities are. And that is, they agreed to Torah sight unseen. An entire people accepted this covenant before they even knew what it was about. What allowed them to make that bold move was their relationship with God, who had redeemed them from bondage and brought them out of Egypt to freedom. Only after they had committed themselves could they explore what was in this sacred text and agree to live by its precepts. But they didn't only accept it for themselves, but for all future generations, including ours. Now, parents do this all the time for their children. For example, when they decide their child is going to take music lessons or play a sport or learn a foreign language. But the decision of the ancient Israelites was different in that it was a covenant, something that they agreed to for all time, like a promise made in one generation but kept in the next. I recently read about a woman named Angie who had moved into her first apartment soon after her father had died. He had been ill for many years, but even so, her dad always found a way to help her with the practical challenges she faced. And after he died, she came across a note that he had left for her on his bulletin board. He wrote this: "If you ever need anything fixed and I'm not around, call my friend Howard for help." And underneath was his number. Angie had never met Howard. She didn't recall her father ever talking about him, but she kept that number. And soon after, when Angie had a leak in her kitchen sink, she did call Howard, and he kept the promise he had made to her father. He showed up, and he repaired the sink. Now, Howard may not have known or realized that he was doing something special, that his friendship placed him in the company of our ancestors who responded, demonstrating their readiness to keep a promise. In the portion that Hannah read so beautifully, when the Israelites were counted as part of a census, they responded in a similar way. The text says us, by se'u et rosh, by lifting their heads, like raising your hand, like saying, count me in. Lifting your head was a way to accept responsibility. It was an affirmation that they could be counted on. In that moment of response, the Israelites didn't pause to ask, what am I getting myself into? Like Moses, who answered God's call at the burning bush, like Abraham, who responded to God's test, like Joseph, who was sent by his father to see how his many brothers were faring as they pastured their flocks. Each one answered with a single word, Hineni, here I am. Each one of these leaders could have responded differently. Abraham could have questioned God's extraordinary command to bring his beloved child Isaac to the mountain to be sacrificed. And Moses could have refused to act as God's partner, standing firmly behind his claim that he was just not up to the job. As for Joseph, Rabbi Lawrence Kushner reminds us, Joseph has no notion that his journey to see his brothers would become part of the journey of slavery and redemption of the Jewish people. What they didn't do was ask God, "What's in it for me?" Instead, as participants in the covenant, in the ongoing, age-old relationship, they affirmed their place. I'm here, I'm ready. This is what our ancestors agreed to on our behalf so long ago at Sinai. Their faith has become our responsibility and blessing as each subsequent generation has had to learn how to respond to the call of Judaism, to provide food for the hungry and justice for those who have been wronged, to redeem someone who is captive, to speak for those who cannot, for the betterment of the whole, the community, the entire collective. Rabbi Harold Schulweis wrote, "This is what Hineni is all about, the willingness to respond to the other, the readiness to act on the other's behalf no matter what is being asked." Like Hannah did moments ago tomorrow night on the holiday of Shavuot, Jews worldwide will symbolically renew what it means to receive the Torah, re-energizing our commitment to the gift of a moral covenant our ancestors made for us. We have a debt to them, just as they had an obligation to us, to future generations. Though they couldn't know us, they knew what they wanted for us, which prompts us to ask what we want for ourselves and our children. With the giving of the Torah, we see parallels to our own Constitution. Like our ancestors, the founders signed it on our behalf with the hope that the society they wanted for themselves would still be valued 250 years later. Like the Torah, the Constitution is a living instrument which continues to evolve, amended to respond to the changing needs of society. And yet its genius rests in the stability it creates, which allows our nation to function in a predictable way. As citizens, we know what is expected of us, and we happily comply because living by these laws creates a harmonious society. 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Hanania remarked upon why law is the essential quality necessary for the public good when he taught, "Pray for the welfare of the government, but for the fear thereof, people would swallow each other alive." Law is what makes civil society possible, and when it works, it creates a public framework in which freedom allows our moral values to flourish. Because of the recent turbulent changes roiling the stability of our society, the qualities so clearly associated with us as Americans have been brought into question. It was President Franklin Delano Roosevelt who in 1941 against the backdrop of fascism, delineated the four freedoms framing the values of democracy that are particular to the United States. Roosevelt said, "In the future, we look forward to a world founded upon four essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in their own way, everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which means economic security for everyone in every nation, everywhere in the world. And the fourth is freedom from fear, anywhere in the world." President Roosevelt once sought to bring these qualities to the larger world, and we have the challenge now of preserving them at home. But will we know when to raise our hand, or how will we be called on to respond? Allow me to share a story of heroism and bravery, which is a family favorite. Like so many in his day, in the days of Roosevelt, my father-in-law, Hank, served in World War II as a combat medic attached to the Signal Corps. On this particular night, his unit was about to cross the Rhine, and they needed to prepare the battlefield the night before the engagement. Now, this was before the age of cell phones, when soldiers would string up the battlefield so they would be able to communicate with the necessary parties. It was a dangerous duty to be right at the front. And because of that, it was strictly a volunteer mission. Hank told us that all of the other soldiers were married, and so he thought he should volunteer. And when he tried to speak, fear took his voice, and so he put up his hand instead. Like the Israelites, he lifted his head and rose to the moment, affirming his readiness to serve. Hank fought against fascism. What is expected of us? Our challenge is the preservation of democracy that he had fought for, of our freedoms here at home. The Civil War historian and former president of Harvard, Drew Faust Gilpin, notes, "All that is asked of us is to speak up." In a Memorial Day essay entitled, "They Died for the Promise of America," Dr. Faust Gilpin reflected on the outcome of the Civil War. She wrote, "Together they did save the Union, that nation that has given me and so many others opportunities that the war-born imperative of ever-expanding freedom has offered. These men made our lives possible. They were impelled to risk all by a sense of obligation to the future. We possess a reciprocal obligation to the past. We must not squander what they bequeathed to us. We are not being asked to charge into a hail of artillery fire," she said, "but only to speak up and stand up in the face of foundational threats to the principles for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. We have been entrusted with their legacy." And Dr. Faust Gilpin concludes, "Can we trust ourselves to uphold it?" And I would ask that slightly differently. I would ask, how do we plan to uphold it? Just as we began with Torah, that is how we should conclude, with the things that we know and value. For within our tradition, we have the foundation of democracy, the value of education, the importance of debate and free speech, the obligation of society to protect the vulnerable, whether from want or in the pursuit of justice, and the enduring value of shalom, of the kind of peace which vanquishes fear. When we lift up and protect what is precious in our tradition, we mend the fraying corners of society. Each one of us is called to raise our hand and act to preserve and repair what we value. That is the Torah we placed into Hannah's capable arms. It is up to us to accompany her, to carry it forward for the sake of those who come after us. It is a tree of life to those who choose to walk in the light of its words. Shabbat Shalom.